Hello, everyone. That song was Pod Friends by the one, the only Will from America. And I am your host, the host of Pod Friends, Matt Scott. I'm also the co host of the Wrestling Wrap Up with the one, the only Mari Forth. And first and foremost, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody for just your love and support around the premiere of Pod Friends, the very first episode featuring Taryn Armstrong and my conversation with him. As you could tell in that interview, was just so nervous. There's all this nervous energy as we talked about anytime you start with something and create something. And it could be a lot, but it was so great to hear all of the love and the positive feedback, and just even more than that, how Taryn's story and different parts of it resonated with you, whether that was finding your own career path and finding your path in life, or feeling like you don't belong, or feeling like you don't see a future. That's one thing that I love about Pod Friends, is that it's really this place for people, myself included, to find themselves in the stories of other podcasters. And, I mentioned last week how Taryn's story, as someone who's streamed, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours in the last few years, kind of illustrates there's so much more we could learn about people when we sit and have these conversations. And, this week's guest is another great example of that, because this week's guest is none other than my one and only co-host, the co-host of the Wrestling Wrap Up, and really, I would say the founder of the Wrestling Wrap Up, Mari Forth. And over the last year, we have recorded probably 100 hours of podcast conversations over on the Wrestling Wrap Up Pro Wrestling Podcast. But the thing that's so interesting with that, through 100 plus hours of conversations, through actually 50 episodes, which we're celebrating this month, there are so many things that we still had to learn about each other. And that's one reason I love this Pod Friends conversation that you're about to hear, because in it, you'll not only start out by hearing a little bit about wrestling, skip ahead a few minutes after the interview starts if you want to skip over a little bit of wrestling talk about Mari's Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling. But we really dive into Mari's story and her life as a military kid, to two parents in the military, moving to Hawaii and then back to the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, the DMV area. Our shared experiences in Catholic school as non-Catholic kids, which is really interesting and something we discovered about each other this week. And Mari's really important work on the front lines of COVID as a healthcare worker. And there's just so much more that defines Mari, from being a wife and a mom, and her career and her life, and just how she shows up and consuming insane amounts of TV. And, the thing that really points out for me is this question that I would love for all of us to consider as we listen to this conversation with Mari. And it's, who is defining who you are? Who's defining your identity? And really, what are the parts of your identity? Who are you? When I think about Mari and her story, one thing I think is so powerful is that there are so many parts, and she's not simply as important and valuable as it is, a wife or a mom. She doesn't feel the need to choose, and finds a way to pull in all of these passions and balance all of these things that she loves. And so I'm so inspired by Mari. I love being her co-host on the Wrestling Wrap Up, and I'm just so thankful for her. So you'll hear a little bit of my thanks for her in the podcast. But before we dive in, I just want to encourage folks, first and foremost, to follow Pod Friends on social media, at Hey Pod Friends. That's at Hey Pod Friends on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of the platforms. And one of the great things about following is that about a day or so before the episode drops, you'll actually get a sneak peek into who's actually going to be on the podcast. So that's the big way that I'll be making those announcements. Another thing that I would say is that if you follow at Hey Pod Friends, you could find the form to nominate guests or nominate potential people who I could interview in the future on Pod Friends. And I just want to thank everyone who has been so gracious and submitted ideas of guests. Some of them, well, one of them, Mari, is featured on this week's episode, but some of them will come up in this first season and hopefully in future episodes of Pod Friends. But if you want to fill out the form to let me know suggestions you have when it comes to other guests, other people who could be in this podcast, and it's not just RHAP podcasters, but others in our community, you could go to bit.ly/podfriendsnom. That's bit.ly/podfriendsnom. Do it. Take a second. You could run across the room. I know everyone, last week I said it in my intro, you probably have your phone all the way across the room. Feel free to run across the room, grab your phone, follow at Hey Pod Friends, go to bit.ly/podfriendsnom. Let me know who you want to see on the podcast. And otherwise, if you want to get in touch, email me at podfriends@robhasawebsite.com. And, it's been great to receive your email so far, and I might just read your email, part of your email on the show. I'm also excited for a Pod Friends podcast feed coming soon, so I'll let you know about that because I would absolutely love your ratings, your reviews, your subscriptions, all so that we could help more people find the stories of the amazing people who are part of our community, who really make RHAP the special place that it is. Also, on top of all this, I want to let you know, if you are listening to my voice, that this podcast and all the Pod Friends podcasts will be available on the RHAP YouTube, robhasawebsite.com/YouTube. I am on the reality TV RHAP Ups feed currently, but again, Pod Friends feed coming soon. Still, rate, review, subscribe, support reality TV RHAP Ups. And finally, I will absolutely encourage you to wait a week or two, wait until it's the first of the month to do this, but you should become an RHAP patron. I have been an RHAP patron for a couple of years now, and you can become a patron at robhasawebsite.com/Patreon or patreon.com/RHAP. And, I would encourage it because, as a great example, just the other night, I played a patron mafia game with a bunch of other patrons. And if you want to see how that went, I don't have the best track record in podcaster mafia. So I was glad that I had the chance to play that game. And, we have games, we have events and streams and special podcasts. And there's the Patron 5 for 5 with Nicole and Rob. And, so many incredible things on Patreon. So I hope that you check that out too. But I think those are my plugs. Those are most of my plugs. And, the big thing I would say too, again, at Hey Pod Friends on social media, you could also follow and connect with me at MattScottGW. But without further ado, I am going to introduce our phenomenal guest. Making her way to the podcast, hailing from the DMV by way of Hawaii, she's the co-host of the Wrestling RHAP Up, and you could hear her talking about Insecure, 90 Day Fiancé. She's on RHAP, she's on the Bachelorette podcast, on the Challenge podcast, talking about RuPaul's Drag Race. She watches everything, and she's a mom, a wife, a healthcare worker, a tourist, a podcaster, and my future amazing race partner. BuzzFeed's own, because there was that one article, that one podcast, and the EST of RHAP. That means the toughest, the strongest, the chillest, the organizedest, the wrestlingest, who somehow finds time to watch it all and let us all in on it. Please welcome Mari Ford. I don't know. Well, maybe the first thing I'll ask you, Mari, just to put you on the spot, name your Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling.
Why do we do this?
What do you mean, why do we do this?
If you're gonna give me that question on a podcast where I can't flip it back to you and ask you to answer that question, that's unfair because it's so hard to do. And if any of these listeners were avid listeners, they would know what my Mount Rushmore was when I said it that one time
a year ago.
Yes, I know. I will do it. I'm just saying.
Who is it?
So the reason why
Mari, you're always just dancing around, always dancing around the questions.
No, it's only because it's so hard, right? Because when you do a Mount Rushmore, it's like, do you go generational talent? Do you go overall talent? Do you go just how that person makes you feel? So for me, I think my Mount Rushmore has to be first and foremost China, because she
Okay.
was just one of the women's wrestlers that like connected with immediately. Like first seeing her, like she's just such amazing, so amazing to me. And as like a tomboy growing up, I love seeing China.
The ninth
Then
wonder of the world. We love
the
her.
ninth wonder of the
Okay,
world.
that's one.
That's one. Then I have to go over to Trish Stratus because I have no idea what made me connect with her, but maybe it's just
Yeah.
her charisma. Like Trish is one of those talents that is so charismatic.
Yeah,
You
and unique.
know, and yes, and
She's got a
unique.
lot of nerve.
Okay, well. Uh so it was just like one
It's
of those things
ridiculous.
where you know a wrestler is good when they can do both be both a heel, like a bad guy, and a face, and do them both like very convincingly.
Mhm.
And I think Trish was one of those first women that like really I felt like could do that. And I could boo and hate her when I needed to and then love her when I was supposed to. So that's why I'm a huge Trish Stratus fan. Third, Sasha
I'm
Banks.
counting. Okay, just
Yeah,
making sure
Sasha
she's in
Banks.
there. Yes.
Yeah, she's the current best women's wrestler of all time in the world right this very second. So yeah, I'll say that.
Yep.
And she was the one who brought me back to wrestling. If it wasn't for her, I would not have gone back. I would have gone into the wrestling podcasting game. So definitely Sasha Banks. And then finally, the last spot is kind of hard because there's so many women I feel like you can justifiably put in that last spot. But I think I'm definitely gonna have to go with Bailey for right now, because as Sasha's contemporary, again, it was both of their match. It was their takeover match in Brooklyn that brought me back to wrestling, and it is a lot of people consider it the greatest women's wrestling match of all time, myself included. Some people don't. I think it was.
I
Um,
I agree. I
yeah.
agree. Yeah.
So that's why I have to put Bailey up there. She's a great worker too, and she, again, great baby face, horrendous heel in a good way. And
Mhm.
so, I can't wait till she comes back. So I'm gonna put that's gonna be my 4. And the next time you ask me in 3 months, it might be a different 4. It's always that's the beauty of the Mount Rushmores. They can change.
See, I just fooled people into listening to a wrestling podcast right now. And no, I
I'm
think
so
one
proud of
thing
you.
that's kind of funny about all of this is that there are a lot of people who listen, who see your name, who recognize you from things that are not the wrestling
Yeah.
wrap up, where we are co-hosts, where we
Yeah.
podcast together. But I think the other thing that's cool is that it's not often that you get like that you purposely get a behind the scenes kind of conversation between two people who podcast together.
Yeah.
It happens sometimes by accident when things aren't edited out. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but you're welcome also. And but I think it's nice that we kind of be here talking about this stuff. And I would ask you more wrestling questions, but like just to start out, Mari, like
Mhm.
a lot of people want to know. They want to hear from you. You are
Yeah, I'm
like the
here.
mystery person who people say
Uh,
we know so much about Mari and yet we know so little. But like, what
mm.
is your life, Mari? People want to know. They
Oh,
want to
that is
know.
a very broad question here.
That's the only question I'm asking over the course of this time together, over the course of this entire podcast.
It's like broad question. Go. What is my life? Let's see. Where should I start?
Well, I
I'll
think one way to talk about it is like,
Mhm.
what was your day like today? I don't know what your day was like
Wow.
today.
This is so today it's so funny that you would
Oh,
mention that. I in my current job, I'm a technical consultant, and that normally entails going to different facilities, different healthcare facilities, and helping those facilities, training them on instrumentation. And that was one of the things that I did today. Yeah, I
that's a
have to be
Latanya
vague.
Stark's word.
Yeah.
I don't. What is instrumentation? Is it like how
So
to use instruments of some
yeah,
sort?
yeah,
Wow.
like healthcare instruments, Yeah, my current day right here, I gotta be a little bit vague because,
Yes.
well, like we said, we're not trying to get nobody fired for a
Or docs.
podcast. Yeah. But yeah, like I'm on the front lines helping with like COVID-19 testing. And so my company gets diagnostics tests out to different healthcare facilities, and then I help go and train them on how to properly run the tests on like many different types of testing and different types of viruses, bacteria, all that good stuff. Like I am a technical consultant now, but I originally went to school for clinical laboratory science to become then a medical technologist. And so before 2020, before I got
Right.
my current job,
Hmm.
I spent like almost 10 years in different hospital laboratories, and that's like that
Oh,
was my
wow.
main job, yeah, up until just year and a half, 2 years ago. And that's where like my passion is. I went to school to do that, and I did it.
Yeah. Wait,
Hmm.
this is okay. Well, this is a lot to break down.
It
So
is, yeah.
the reason why is because if you listen to the wrestling wrap up, Mari might sprinkle in some for expertise as a healthcare worker.
Yes.
But even beyond that, one thing that I know that people also asked about is this whole other side as a mom,
Yeah.
and so people are curious about that. But like, as someone who does not have kids, like, what is that like for you to be a mom and
Yeah.
be this healthcare worker? And then we'll tie in all the podcasting and all the other craziness. But yeah, like,
Yeah.
what's the other hat that you wear?
Well, that's kind of the reason why I am no longer a medical technologist in a hospital
Mm,
laboratory. When the pandemic hit, when COVID-19 first, we went into lockdowns in March 2020. I was still on the front lines in the hospital. I was working as a medical technologist, and we process patient's blood. We process um, all sorts of things. If you ever get your blood drawn, if you ever have to pee in a cup,
oh,
like they send it to me, and
call
then
Mari.
yeah, and we analyze it. But when the pandemic hit, my son he had just turned 1. Like he had
Yeah,
just turned 1 when everything went into lockdown. And it was very uncertain times, and then slowly a lot of people in the lab started coming down with COVID like very early in the pandemic. And I was just like, I can't do this. You know what I'm saying? I have a toddler at home, and God forbid I bring this virus that, at the time we knew nothing about back
yeah,
home to my family. Um and put them at risk. And a lot of healthcare workers out there, I'm sure, especially our nurses, all of our direct patient care people understand this. It's like those first couple of months were really scary because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know the treatment. Nurses were taking it back home to their, not just nurses, but healthcare
yeah.
workers were taking it back to their families. And it was a very scary time. And so that was around the time when I started looking for another job. I was just like, I can't, I don't want to risk it. And so luckily enough, I was able to find my current position around June, July of
Hmm.
2020. And then I transitioned in August. And now I get to work from home. I get to stay remote, work at home. And that's the beauty of it, because now my son he'll be turning 3 in
Hmm.
next month. He'll be turning 3 next month. And doing that job change really helped with the mom side of things. Like I love when like listeners want to know more about my son and about my life. Me and my husband have been married going on 6 years this year, and I truly honestly can't do the whole mom act without him. You know what I'm saying? Like I
Yeah.
can't do a podcast, I can't also work from home without him. And truly he is the driving force giving me this time. He's with my son right now distracting him as mommy's
Figured as much,
upstairs.
right?
Yeah. So as much as people might want to think like I'm a super mom, it's truly not that. It's just I have a terrific partner who supports me and who supports this dream, and helps, especially for a very, very hyperactive like toddler. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that that's a little bit about me
Look, this
being a
is
mom.
like no, this
Mhm.
is it's interesting though because I never really thought about like the the whole well, I knew that 2020 was a lot for a lot of people and a lot of shifts
Mhm.
for a lot of people around March, but then I even think about, you having the new job and then of course
Mhm.
becoming part of RHAP, like, it really
Yeah.
sounds to me like that June, July
All
2020
happened at the
period
same
was
time.
a big shift, but
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll go way back. We'll talk
Mhm.
about how we both happened to go to Catholic school growing up and all those other things. But, like, what was that point in your life like? Because you, like the rest of us who are part of the class of 2020, had to make the decision to apply, and,
Mhm.
I mean, if I was in kind of the place that you're in where so much is just like in motion, maybe I wouldn't have done that. But I'm so curious, like what motivated you to actually apply? And then what was it that like actually being chosen for the class of 2020?
Yeah, I mean, like, right? Like, pure chaos was my life for, like, a good 3 months. So, I've said this story on every podcast that I've ever been able to be on, but Lita Brillman, she, had posted about, needing more diverse, voices in podcasting and, how she wanted to help bring more voices to podcasting, and I saw that tweet because I had dabbled in podcasting, like me and my friends had this wanted to try and start a podcast, but I just didn't have the time or the production skills to do any of that. And but I did know it was something I wanted to do. So I reached out to her, and then it was like that same week or two that Rob had then put out the call for the class of 2020. And she was like, hey, yeah, do this, fill this out if you want to do it. And so I did. I saw the post, I commented, done. I saw Rob, liked it, and I signed up for it. And then it was just so funny because when we had our interviews for it,
Right.
I was unemployed. Like, because
Yeah.
I basically I quit my job knowing that I was going to start my next job. You know what I'm saying? So we were at my husband's mom's house, just, chilling. I didn't have a job. Us being there, she was able to help out with my son. We could, all help out, and my husband was still working. And he works remote too, so he can work from anywhere. So we were just there for a few weeks to a month, waiting until my new job started, and I had to do the interview from his childhood bedroom, about Drag Race, and I after that interview, I was like, I felt good about it. You always feel good about it, but then you just never know. You know
Do
what I'm
you
saying?
remember who was there, by the
Oh
way,
yeah,
off the top of your head?
definitely.
Because I
De-
remember it being a lot of people.
it was Rob, Amon, and Liana, and
Oh,
it
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it was a Drag Race podcast.
Hmm.
I had because at the time when I applied, All Stars 5 was on. So when they asked for the hottest take, I talked about how a lot of the POC queens get the villain edit, like the very
Hmm.
unforgiving villain edit and all of that. And that was my hot take, and I entered it as Drag Race, from a Drag Race point of view, but I made it clear on my application, I watched literally everything.
Yeah.
So I actually did come away thinking, I was like, did they understand that I also watch a lot of other stuff? So getting that call to do the All Stars 22 cast assessment was like crazy. And then I think me and Chantel's was the first ones to drop. And it was just
Wow.
like, it was just life changing, really. And it's just, we were picked out of so many people who applied, and I'm so grateful for that. I always have been, and Rob knows we say we're grateful to him every single chance. I think he's tired of hearing it at this point.
He probably is like, just shut up and
Yeah.
stop talking about how grateful you are.
Yeah.
I get it, but don't make me cry.
Yeah. So
Um,
it was a complete like just a leap of faith. And I don't know if Matt, I don't think you know too much about me, but when it comes to stuff like this, I'm a very practical person. Like
yeah.
I'm a Taurus. I do not like change.
Hmm.
Like, so it's like to change jobs, apply for this podcast thing, and just be like up in the air for even the month that I was up in the air
Yeah.
for me is very hard.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that all of the times that I have taken leaps of faith like that is worked out. And I'm glad this one did, because it was literally life changing. Everything, this and changing jobs, was life changing.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear. I mean, especially from my perspective too, because I have my own view of number one, like joining the class of 2020, and probably very
Mhm.
different from you, like to contrast our maybe our personalities, but also just like how we approached it. I actually remember seeing the tweet from Rob.
Mhm.
It was like after I happened to post a video to Rob on social media that was actually just like thanking him, because there was Island of the Idols, which was obviously horrible and
Yeah.
everything there. And I remember I appreciated, like, again, from like my background in sexual assault, I was like, wow,
Mhm.
Rob did such a great job bringing in experts and talking about that. And then everything happened with George Floyd, and Rob
Mhm.
was just like very, very much handling it in a way where I was proud to still be a listener. And like
Mhm.
as a Black person too, I remember having this thought of like, oh my God, is he gonna let me down? Like, are we
Yeah.
gonna have to stop listening to like this podcast network I've been listening to for years? And that wasn't the case. And so I remember kind of giving that shout out to Robin, like making a little iPhone video, posting it. And then the class of 2020 thing came out, and it was literally like 11:56 p.m. the day of the deadline, where I was like, crap, I have 3 minutes and I need to
Oh,
get this in. So that was me. That's how I ended up here, which is like the
wow.
contrast. Big contrast. Like,
Yeah.
damn. Class of 2020, we're both
Mhm.
accepted. There are a million people in this class of 2020. Like
Yeah.
everyone you see is in the class of 2020. But obviously, some people are still around and others aren't. Like,
Mhm.
what was that process like for you? Because let's say that there were 50 people from the class of 2020 who were talking about Big Brother. Like, did you how did it feel doing these podcasts about Big Brother? Did you Yeah, I'll just stop there because
Yeah.
I don't want to like put my
No, no,
experience on
no.
you, even
Yeah.
though I know that you're good.
Yeah, and the good thing is, like, I also should probably make it clear, I was a RHAP listener. Like,
Of
the
course,
funny thing is,
yeah,
yeah, I didn't start as far back as some of y'all, but I think I've said it on a few posts. I started listening right after BBOTT for
yeah,
BB19.
yeah.
Yeah, so but I think I think one reason that, if we're gonna assume, I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but I think one of the reasons why I love doing the Big Brother coverage, and I feel like people might like hearing me do the the Big Brother
I like
coverage,
hearing you do it, so that's all that you need to know.
is because I try to be as authentic as possible when doing the coverage, and I always try to give my perspective of what I'm interpreting when I'm watching BB. And we just so happened we came in during the All-Star season, and we all know that All-Star season was incredibly problematic.
Trash.
You know what I'm saying? There was just so many, yeah, there was so many things that constantly needed to be addressed.
Yes.
It felt
Yeah.
like and I have no problems with speaking my mind,
Yeah.
of explaining my experience to people who may not understand it, because I am one of those people who like agree. I don't mind educating people, but there's we both work in this like type of field where we know where you can educate somebody and you can feel like you're being listened to, and you feel like you're being heard, and you don't feel overwhelmed in doing it. And then I'm pretty sure we both have a line. Everybody
Yeah.
has a line where it's like, okay, it is not my job to make you understand this. And I think we do a beautiful job of being open to teaching, while also, if we're not feeling it, we're not feeling it. So I think that's why a lot of people may resonate with that, because I truly do. If I say it on a podcast, I mean it 125%. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I'm not backing off of that. And that's just truly how I love the podcast. And I've gotten comments where it's like, I like to break down. I'm a strategy person. Like I do like strategy, like Taryn, but I am an emotionally strategic player as well.
Right.
So I feel like bringing that emotional side and understanding how these characters, they're characters on a TV show, but they're also still people. And especially when it comes to very serious issues, how that can affect your gameplay should always be considered. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes the move that you consider is right for that person in that house might not be right for that person in that house for the way that they are feeling and how people make them feel. And that is a valid, emotions and feelings are valid in games that are social strategic games. So I love podcasting about BB. It is literally one of my favorite shows of all time. I've been watching it since I was I want to say like 14, and then I went back, of course, and binged them all. I was on the online forums trying to get the
All
live
right.
feeds. Yeah, before I could I couldn't afford to watch them. I had to just have people, type them out and tell me what happened.
Back when the feeds were in black and white, of course, back in the
Yeah.
day on the horse and buggy. Wait, I want to
Yeah.
interrupt and kind of
No,
dive
yeah,
in deeper because
mhm.
no, it's you're starting to kind of paint this picture of you growing up as a fan, and I think that it's so interesting to think what it is that makes us kind of like the weird people who watch way too
Mhm.
much TV, who
Mhm.
really analyze slash over analyze. I think we properly analyze the
I
shows
think
that
so
we
too.
watch. But like, what was it like for you growing up? I have no clue how much of a role this plays, but like we both
Mhm.
have in common that we went to Catholic school
Yeah, we
growing
did.
up. And so I have not thought about how that has affected me. But like
Yeah.
how is your upbringing? Well, what was your upbringing like? Like, where was it? What were some of the things that stand out? But also, how did it
Yeah.
make you who you are today?
Um, so I'm a military brat. I've
Hmm.
said this before. I am a military brat. Not only that, but both of my parents were in the Air Force. So both my mom and my dad were in the Air Force. So, I moved around a lot as a kid, but nowhere near as much as some people because I don't think a lot of people realize when both your parents are in the military, you don't move as much as
Hmm.
opposed to one parent being in the military. So like for instance, if my dad ever had to, my dad would have got stationed in so many places when I was a kid. I think right after I was born, he was stationed in Korea. But we didn't
Damn.
go to Korea because my mom works in the Air Force and we needed to stay in Vegas so she could do her job. So it was a lot of that. It would be my dad would go to Korea for a year. I remember he was stationed in Guam at one point. My mom was stationed in Italy when I was like around 12 or 13 for a year. And you don't get to go when both your
Yeah.
parents are there. You just stay with the parent that's stationed. And so what happened was, I was born in Vegas. We stayed there for 4 years, and then we moved to Washington D.C. And I was in Washington D.C. from 4 to 10, so for 6 years.
Hmm.
And this is where I was scarred for life because
Oh,
maybe
uh-oh.
this might be your ministry as well, but DC has had very bad public schools back then, still
Mm,
probably today.
yeah.
And so when I was in second grade, I was only there from second grade to fourth grade, second, third, and fourth. And it was enough to scar me for life. I had to go to Catholic school because that was the only schools that were good enough in the area.
Yeah. And by the way,
Yeah.
I had like my with my so I because I had three older or I have three older siblings, but had three
Mhm.
older siblings growing up. So like my oldest sister went to the public school where we're from. My parents were like, nope, like,
Nope.
and we're not even Catholic. They were just like, we're putting you in that school
Us
because
either.
we know that that education will work out. And so I was like, okay, that's life. That's what it is. But yeah, similar
Yeah.
pattern there.
They
And I think part of it too, I will say, is like my dad, while like while I've been alive, he was never in the military or in the army, but he was in the army like before I was
beforehand.
born, like
Mm.
way before having a
Mhm.
family too. So I don't know. It's funny seeing the different patterns and things repeat, but it's
Yeah.
also funny because like we've literally in the last year spent 100 hours podcasting, and it's like
Yeah.
all these little details where you're like, oh wait, what? We have that in
Yeah,
common?
really?
What? It's insane.
Yeah. And it's funny because, yeah, people don't realize like Catholic school may give you a great education, but the religious trauma is like
Still there.
always will be. And it's even worse if
Yeah.
you're not
Ugh.
Catholic because it's the same thing, Matt. I don't know if your school did this, but when you're a Christian going to a Catholic school, not only did I'm pretty sure we had to pay more to
Oh my
they had to pay, yeah, my parents had to pay more. My mom
Oh
told me
no.
this later. They had to pay more than what a Catholic student would pay to
Wow.
go to that school because you're technically taking up a spot for a Catholic student.
Yeah.
But then the religious trauma starts because, you know, you can't take communion.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, right.
So you're
So
just sitting
you're
there.
just sitting there. Exactly.
But that's like underdeveloped brain. Like that, I don't.
Yes.
So how old were you when you started going to
I,
Catholic school by
so
this math?
I was 7. It was
7.
7, 8, and 9, yeah, when I went to a Catholic school. And
Okay.
for me,
Yeah.
it was all of the kids who are not Catholic. You can't participate in communion. So you have to sit there and watch while everybody goes and does communion. And they basically tell you you're going to hell because you're not Catholic. And all of the kids that are sitting there, it's only about 6 of us. Most of us are black. Like it's all of the black kids.
Yeah, I was gonna
Like
say.
it's me, another black dude, and 2 sets of girl twins who are my friends. And there was I think I remember there was one white guy. I don't know why. I don't know his situation, but it was all of us. All of the black people were the only
That's
ones who
such a
weren't
good
Catholic.
point. And it's a good
Yeah.
point. And it's the type of thing too where I can't tell you why, but a few weeks ago it crossed my mind. I was like, why didn't they just have us like, walk up, maybe say hi, shake a hands,
Yeah.
maybe high five, like,
Yes.
hey, how's everyone else doing with the communion? Is it working out? Great. But yeah, there's a ton of trauma that probably comes from
So
that
much
where it's
trauma.
like you just kind of get used to it. Like I
Yeah. Being the
literally didn't
odd
even
person
think.
out.
Yeah, but you're
Mhm.
just like, hey, I guess I could. The way that I think I kind of looked, maybe I look at it now, which is maybe more of a positive, is like, okay, you're sitting back and you're observing and you're taking it all in. Like I knew the
Mhm.
Catholic service, the Catholic church service at the time, like the back of my hands, like probably better than anyone
Mm.
else, just because I would sit there and take it in. It's like, okay, now here's the time where everyone gets up. So I'm gonna stand up and like let them all go out of the aisle. And yeah, oh
Wow,
my God. So
totally opposite. The
oh
only
no.
good thing about Catholic mass, which we had to attend every Wednesday, was that it was only like an hour.
Yeah.
And for me, like
Oh, I
my
wasn't
mind,
having a great time. I just
yeah, but you paid
yeah,
attention.
I
My mind
did.
was racing. It was
Mm,
racing. It was constantly, I don't know what I was thinking about as a kid. It was everything but what was happening in front of me, you know?
yeah,
Um, it I it is very, very triggering,
yeah,
and you don't realize it. You truly don't realize it until you're, out of it, and how horrendous the bullying it. They're still bullying there, at
yeah.
Catholic schools. It's still bad. And then they threaten corporal punishment there too. So it's
Oh my
like,
God.
if you're bad, there's the paddle. It's right here. Those nuns can hit you with the paddle. It's very shame filled, but we don't have to get into that. But the biggest thing is
Yeah,
we left. I left after 4th grade, and that's when I ended up in Hawaii. And I was in Hawaii from 10 to 16, and that was like a huge experience for me. Um and I think I truly think it shapes the way I live my life now, because first and foremost, as a military kid, your friends are coming in and out of your life all the time. Like
mhm,
when you live on a military base, when you go to a military school or a school that's 90% military kids, unfortunately you don't get to keep friends. And
yeah,
so you have to constantly make friends. And so I'm such a person where I love my friends and I hoard my friends, and I'm still friends with people I've been friends with for 20 plus years. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how intense I am with my friendships. But also it made me be able to make those connections quickly, and then understand if something happens, you got to go, you got to enjoy the time you have with them.
yeah,
But it also, Hawaii is a melting pot. I was on Oahu. We were in Hickam Air Force Base is where we were stationed. And it truly is a melting pot. People say America is a melting pot.
yeah,
Hawaii is the true melting pot because of all of
Yeah.
the militarization, the unfortunate colonization of a whole people and
Shout
all of
out.
that.
Yeah.
But I truly had friends of all different cultures and backgrounds, and being Black in that environment was so fun and interesting. But the funny thing is, um the only Black culture that some of us Black students had in Hawaii was what we saw on TV, is what we saw on BET, is what we saw
Yeah.
on the, which is really absurd in a way, because it wasn't until we ended up back in Maryland, when I turned 16, that I was like, this is not how I thought Black people acted, when I
Oh,
came back to
no.
Maryland. Like, it's just so funny, how that works. But Hawaii truly um changed my life. My best friend is, we still rock together. We live close to each other, and that's my soulmate for my friendship. And it's just, I'm so glad I had that upbringing, because I got exposed to so many different people, like just literally so many people. um
Yeah.
so that was such a great experience growing up. And then coming back to Maryland was probably the hardest transition I've ever made in my entire life,
Yeah.
because I left in the middle of high school. You know what I'm saying? I had my freshman and sophomore year in Hawaii. I had already had friends that I've had for years. And then I come to Maryland. I know nobody. I'm a junior. And the sucky thing is, because in Hawaii, I was already taking AP classes. I was a very smart kid growing
Yeah.
up.
Clearly.
And
We
yeah,
know.
clearly. Yeah. Great. I had great grades, but a lot of the credits didn't transfer over. So when I came to Maryland, I
Uh-uh.
basically had to take all ninth grade classes, because I didn't take the required Maryland State like freshman classes.
Yeah.
So most of my junior year, I was around people I was older than. I I was like, oh, charm, help me now. And that school was literally, it was half and half. It was half white people, half Black people. And
Mm.
I truly was like, I don't know what's going on here. It was like a culture shock for
Yeah.
me. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, man.
just being back in Maryland. And so I just made some friends my sophomore year, but it was hard because of my classes. But by the time I got to senior year, I was in all AP classes again. I was in all classes with
Okay.
literally
What?
every single class, 6 AP classes, my senior year.
Wow.
And so I was with people who were my age, and that's where I made like the friends that I have today, that I text to, talk to every
Yeah.
day, are still, I got from senior year. But that was like my hardest transition, truly. um and I'm just glad I used some of my gumption from learning how to connect with people. And one of the main ways was TV, connecting
Yeah,
with
wait,
people. Mhm.
I'm so fascinated because you kind of mentioned, back in Hawaii
Mhm.
with the perception of what Black people are being
Yes.
reality TV. Like, who were some of those characters, or what were some of those shows that you were seeing at that time? I'm trying to like do the math,
There
but
w
also think back culturally,
Yeah,
like
the funny thing
what
is,
that was.
back then, back in Hawaii, like, I didn't watch a lot of reality
Yeah.
TV, mostly because a lot of people might not know this, but, Hawaii is 6 hours behind Eastern Time. Yeah, 6 full hours. So, we didn't get some of the channels. Like, I remember we used to get UPN, and then we didn't get UPN, right?
Ooh. That
And
was a
not
big
getting
hit back then too.
I'm telling you, and we used to, like I said, we got it. So I used to watch like Girlfriend, Sister, whatever, half and half,
Yeah.
whatever was on there. I can't remember now. And then we lost it for like, I want to say it was a year or two. And then we got it back. And I don't know if you remember, but I think at one point wrestling was on one of the channels that we lost as well.
Yeah, I think, like,
Um
SmackDown might have been on UPN,
Yes,
but then it was on the
yes,
CW, and they kind of, like, did
yes,
this flip. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. So I lost like 2 years of SmackDown when it was in the SmackDown 6 era. I
Mhm.
didn't get to see that. I was still watching, but unfortunately, I had to only watch Raw, which was during Triple H's Reign of Terror. So
Mm, not
yeah,
great.
exactly. Exactly. But so when it finally came back, they're like, "Okay, you get UPN, but it's at Eastern time." So if I wanted to watch
That math.
anything, yeah, if I wanted to watch anything at 8 o'clock, like the 8 o'clock time period, it would be at 2 o'clock. It'd be at 2 o'clock during the middle of the day when I was still at like track practice,
You mean you didn't have like a little you didn't have a VHS to record over when you weren't
No,
there?
no, exactly.
See,
No, we
that was
didn't.
where you missed out because there's
Yeah.
a VHS somewhere. It might be in the trash. It might be in like a box in my mom's house or something. But I recorded over that so many times for like wrestling
Dang, for
and would just
everything.
watch. Yeah, yeah.
My
It was the same time too, around that same era.
I was kind of we were latchkey. I grew up as latchkey kids
Yeah,
because both of my parents were working, and
same.
then
Yeah.
probably at this point my parents were also divorced. So I was always I was always into sports. And in Hawaii you can do year-round sports. So I got to do every sport that I wanted to do without having to pick. Yeah, so like
So how are you not in the Olympics right now? Because I needed a break. I'm like
because
glad that I grew up in like New Jersey where it's like, oh, it's getting too cold. I guess soccer season's over. Like
yeah.
that was much needed and probably why I don't do sports like that now.
The
But
funny reason
yeah.
is because I left Hawaii. So,
Yeah.
like for fall, I would do bowling. I would do bowling until track started, I'm sorry, until softball started, right?
Mhm.
So softball was in the winter for us because we could play softball during the winter. Yeah, softball was during like it was October through December, and then like a little bit of January.
But
Yeah,
wait,
and
did you just play other teams in like were you just playing other teams on Oahu or like did you even go to, like, other islands to play
S
teams?
so for softball, we played other teams on Oahu. The problem is we went to a school where it was 90% military. So our shortstop, my ninth grade year was not the same shortstop our 10th grade year. But then
Oh.
we would go and play teams around the island who were actually like what we call local teams. Like they were actual local Hawaiians. We would go to Kaneohe, we go to Pearl City, and these would be teams where they had been playing softball together since they were 7. And we would get our butts whooped. Like
Ooh.
when I tell you, we would get our butts handed to us day in and day out. My freshman and sophomore year of softball, we won 2 games, and that was not only it was back to back, so it was the longest winning streak we've ever had, and it was the most games we had won in 4 years.
Disappointing.
In 4 years. So, and I
2
was
games.
good. Yeah, two games. And I was good. I was good on that team. Don't I was great. We had really bad pitchers. Again, there was no team cohesion. I actually made it to varsity. I would have made it to varsity. I made it to varsity at the end of my sophomore year. And then I had to leave. And then the coach didn't know that. And he said if he would have known, he would have bumped me up that whole year. I was like,
Oh.
okay. Well, anyways, and so and with track, I was actually a state champion. We were state champions in track, like for Hawaii. I came in third in the women's 100-meter dash in
Damn.
track when I was in Hawaii. But like, the moment I moved, first off, I had to choose between track and softball because they're the same
Mhm.
season.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't even get on softball my junior year because the girls who were already there from the 3 previous years had taken up all the slots.
Oh,
So
too
I wasn't
many.
even able
Yeah.
to get on the team until my senior year because they finally they had 8 seniors that graduated. So and then they had like 5 JV girls that were moving up. So they had I think they had 2 or 3 extra spots for walk-ons, and I was actually able to walk on. Then
Mhm.
I completely sprained my ankle in the second game of the season trying to steal home and was out for the rest of the season. Um
Damn.
Yeah, and became the man. I was the manager for the whole season. So it was just like that is the biggest thing about moving in the middle of a high school career for like, people who have to do it. Like everything gets disrupted. Like I told you, my grades and my classes got disrupted. My athletics got disrupted. So, I had always I always wanted a scholarship for academics, but having a softball one would have been great as well because that was my main sport was softball.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so curious, like thinking about this. Did you I mean, obviously, like I mean, and unfortunately, like with women's sports too, like there's but even with the sports that you've mentioned, there
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily like a route to go be like a professional
Yeah,
softball player for your career for
didn't
your
wanna
life.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what like when you were at that point in high school, you mentioned
Mhm.
being in Maryland, like what was that did you see yourself going down that healthcare path, or like what was it that you kind of saw
Oh,
for yourself going forward?
yeah, the great thing was, while I was in Hawaii, right, my school had, they had career days, right? Career fairs. And so I remember my career fair in sophomore year. You sign up for things. It was one of those things where you kind of sign up for things and then you
Yeah.
could kind of just like wander around. But the main thing I signed up for was like FBI profiler. And I was like, I've always
Oh,
loved,
damn.
yeah, CSI
That would
was,
be a good fit for you.
well, well, here we
Well, I
go.
mean, you're basically
So,
you basically are one. Low key, Mari works for the FBI. Let's not talk about it.
so I did like the FBI profiler what class or the FBI, and I was like, man, I love this. And then my next class was medical technologist was the career day. And I've always been good at math and science. Like math and science were always my strongest subjects. But I always knew I didn't want to be a doctor. Like I just didn't feel like going the whole doctor route. Maybe I might have a little bit of regret about that now, but 12 years of schooling isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
But when you're a kid and you say you like science, it's literally the only thing they say. You like, oh, go be a doctor or a nurse. Well, I don't want to be a doctor and I don't want to be a nurse because I like people, but I don't like cleaning up after people as like a
Mhm.
nurse, you know? And so I just kind of never understood what I was going to do. I loved biology. I knew I loved biology. I loved the how the human body worked and all that. And I just happened to walk into the medical technologist career day, and it was
Damn.
an Air Force medical technologist, and all he did was he brought slides on like that he projected, and he was like, "This is what urine crystals look like. This is what parasites in your blood look like. This is what." Yeah, he was
Freaky.
just it was, but it was the coolest thing to me. And
Wow.
he explained how, like, yeah, if you look at this, blood slide, if you look right there, that's malaria. You can tell that's a malaria in that person's blood. You can see that ovum there. And it was just mind blowing to me. It was like he
Yeah.
had a slide of like trichomonas for all my science nerds out there. They'll know exactly what I'm talking about, or giardia, which is from vaginal swabs and urine. And it was so cool to me. And I was like, this is what I wanted to do. And it's what I knew I wanted to do at 16. And I was very lucky knowing that because, like I said, I graduated with really good grades. And I've always wanted to go to an HBCU.
Yeah.
I grew up thinking I was going to go to Spelman. I had a Spelman shirt when I was 10.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to go Spelman. But then we moved to Maryland. My mom was like, "Well, what about Howard?" And I was like, "No, lady, you just want me to be close to you. I
Right.
don't want to be close to you. I want to go to college somewhere far,
I would have cut it out just for that reason, honestly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Howard is 40 minutes away from where we lived at the time. And I was like, "No,
Too
no."
close.
But then I started looking into clinical laboratory science programs, which is the same medical laboratory scientist, clinical laboratory science. It all leads to a med tech degree. And Howard actually had one of the best clinical laboratory science programs in the nation, like legit. And I don't even think she
Yeah.
knew that, to be quite honest.
She
And
didn't.
and Spelman didn't. Spelman just had biology at the time, which um I don't want to offend biology majors, but
Uh-oh.
that major is it's too broad and it's a time waster, to be quite honest.
Ooh, at Mari talks too
Yeah,
much
at me.
to like the number
But they know
2.
it. Biology majors know it. Like,
I mean, I
y'all know what
agree.
I'm saying. So, yeah, and so I was like, "Dang it, the lady might be right." And
Yeah.
I'm so close to my mom. I'm really, really incredibly close to my mom.
Literally, because
Uh,
you went to school
I
within 40
did.
minutes of her.
Yeah, it was the program that I was like, "Oh, now I gotta give it a shot," but then it
Yeah,
was stepping foot on campus that made me be like, "Oh, no, this is where I absolutely need to go."
that's
Like,
so funny.
stepping foot on Howard's campus for the first time was just like it all clicked. Just
Yeah,
seeing so many Black people, different Black people, just, excelling, and, we call it the Mecca for a reason,
yeah,
and I was like, "Damn, I gotta go here." And
yeah.
I
Damn.
applied early, I got in, so
No, it's so funny because like my dad went to Howard back in the
yeah.
day,
Mhm.
but because of that, like I loved DC. I spent so much time in DC, but here's the thing: my dad went to Howard. No matter what he said, I couldn't go to Howard. I wasn't going to go to Howard. He went to because he
Really?
went to Howard. I can't. I was
Mhm.
like, no, I'm a Taurus, a stubborn Taurus. So there's that. My
We have that in
others,
common.
my one of my older sisters went to American University, so I was like,
Mm.
not gonna. I'm not even interested in that.
Mhm.
And then I ended up at GW because I was like, well, they take me, they want me here, and they need Black people, and it was only sadly, and this is one of the things where I look back and I'm like, damn, I kind of wish I went to Howard because like the 6% Black versus like
Mm.
actually getting to like be with a lot of really talented, incredible
Mhm.
Black people. It was just unmatched. But I need to ask you,
Mhm.
speaking of matches, you were a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
Did at any point did it cross your mind that you could be a professional wrestler or that you should be a pro wrestler?
No, never.
I wish it was yes.
No, it never was, which is kind of funny because I definitely was like a super athlete like back in the day.
Yeah.
Like I said, track, I had abs because of track because I did hurdles as well. I
Oh
did
my.
hurdles when I was in track.
Mm-mm.
And but it never crossed my mind only because I had gone in and out with wrestling. When the funny thing is when I moved to Maryland, I definitely back in it because my first year, I'm not gonna lie, I was a loner. All I did was
Yeah.
get really good grades and watch TV. And it was also I kind of shared this on the top 40. It was also how I got into Survivor.
Yeah.
Because I was doing absolutely nothing, and I found the outdoor channel and they were replaying the Survivor. So I didn't get into Survivor until I moved to Maryland.
Hmm.
Um but I never thought of it, and then also this was around the time, this was right around Eddie dying and then
Yeah.
Benoit dying, and it was like too much. And then
Yeah.
by the time I went to college, it was, I was no longer really paying attention. 2002 to 2008 is the ruthless aggression era, which
Yeah.
is, in my heart. And 2008 started the PG era, and that's when I like tapped out for what,
Mm.
6 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can blame Howard.
Well, I mean, speaking of Howard and black, I don't know how to say with black people things maybe.
Yeah, there we go.
So so I'm like even curious about your experience as a black woman in the wrestling fandom
Mhm,
because like for me growing up, I can't really think of too many experiences where it felt like race specifically was a factor as a black man because like growing up
mhm,
in New Jersey, whether going to indie shows or like I grew up within a 15-minute drive of Newark too, so it was one of
mhm.
the more diverse parts of New Jersey. And so like I kind of just felt like I fit in even though wrestling was still wrestling and kind of like weird to people.
Yeah.
But for like what was that experience for you? Like I mean, and maybe the bigger piece of this is like being a woman within the wrestling fandom, but I'm just curious like how
Yeah.
those things intersected because I know how much you love Sasha Banks,
Mhm.
Naomi, a ton of other black women in wrestling. Like
Yeah.
just curious where that started.
I can definitely say like it didn't start till recently, and that's, with the
Yeah.
rise of social media,
Yeah.
like actually like examining my place in the fandom because,
Yeah.
growing up as a kid, one of the reasons why I even got into wrestling was because I was just trying to impress a boy I like when like in the 5th grade,
Mhm.
by knowing all these wrestlers, and I just so happened to watch both WCW and WWE on accident, and in Hawaii, wrestling was a big deal. And me and my little brother, we would, we watch and then we would fight each other, and then my mom would have to beat us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but like it was so fun, in Hawaii. But the just a sidebar, they never came to Hawaii. Like the live events, they never
Yeah.
came. They only came like they would come once every 2 or 3 years, I think. And that wasn't until like I was leaving. I think they had came twice right before we left, and I couldn't go either time because I was 15 and nobody would take me.
Yeah.
But like it wasn't. And then when I got to Maryland, I actually, there's some guys that I would talk to about wrestling. Literally would talk about nothing else. We'd only have a few classes, and the only thing we would talk about would be wrestling
Mhm.
together. So shout out to them. They would know who they were if they were listening. Um and then it wasn't until I came back, like after I left off and I came back in 2014, that's the main area where I'm constantly evaluating my fandom because I'm on social media. And social media is where with wrestling, it's, with quote
Yeah.
unquote, if you want to call it the reality era now, that's where all of the action is. If you want to know behind the scenes gossip, if you curate your bubble, like I've done a good job on Twitter of curating my bubble for wrestling fans,
You have to.
specifically a lot of Black women wrestling fans. I found a lot of good follows and mutuals like that, and I have to curate it because if we're truly talking about my place in the fandom, you as a Black woman, you do feel like, at least with the fans, you feel like they don't want you here, that you don't belong all the time. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
they had I don't know if you remember, but they had a Twitter Spaces about why Black women suck. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a whole Twitter Spaces about stuff like that. So you're
Yeah.
constantly fighting for your position in the fandom, and people questioning your who you like and your takes and stuff like that. Like a good follow on wrestling Twitter, um I can't say their handle, but everybody, if you know Taryn on wrestling Twitter, Taryn,
Oh.
she's a
It's like,
great
wait,
follow.
Taryn,
Yeah, no,
he
no,
was just
not
on
that
this
one.
podcast.
She's a great follow,
Taryn.
and you can tell like when women tweet an opinion about wrestling, the pushback is so ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
constantly like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you just watch it because the guys are hot. Like it's constantly belittling
Yeah.
of your opinion of wrestling. Like like I can be a women's wrestling fan, I can talk about how hot Roman Reigns is, but I can also talk about how good of a Canadian destroyer Bad Bunny did. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's not mutually exclusive, and then those, like, you'll see those same fans where like if a man tweets something, an opinion, especially an opinion that's like that's not it's an unpopular opinion that many of us might think agree with, but they tweet it, it's all like, man, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with that take, but it's your right. It's,
Right.
you can have your opinion, I can have mine. It's like, oh, so they get the civility, but then we get attacked for having
Exactly.
literally the exact same take. So, I don't want to put down all of the what we call the IWC, the internet wrestling
Yeah.
community or anything like
Right.
that, because if this doesn't apply to you, then it doesn't apply to you. But I think not I think, I know one of the main reasons we created the Wrestling Rehab Up is to create a more inclusive, diverse space for wrestling fans and, fans, casuals, whatever. And I'm so glad we get to do that because, it's only now are we seeing more inclusion not only on the screen. I think seeing the more inclusion and diversity in wrestling itself is
Yeah.
helping with the fandom being more inclusive and diverse and hopefully being more accepted. There'll always be a patch of people who will always think they're the key demo, you know what I'm saying, that wrestling caters to. but we're here and we're going to take up space, and we're going to do it loudly.
Yeah, and that, but the thing that's so beautiful about that, and obviously you see these parallels because, like I probably said in the intro of this interview, you are BuzzFeed's own Mari
Oh
Forth,
God.
on Talking About the Cookout, earlier. Well, wow, not even earlier this year, last year now at this point during BB23. And the thing I kind of wonder about is kind of if people are listening, if they see the parallels between what you're saying with wrestling fandom and reality TV right now, because we're seeing that
Right.
diversity that's shifting the opinion. Like it's shifting to the point where it's like, oh, we don't just want to have Black people because it's nice and because they add a different perspective and because they're diverse, but like this Black person, like I think of Tiffany as a great example from BB23, could be the best player ever and could dominate strategically and come up with an unbreakable plan. But I want to actually talk about the wrestling wrap up and sort of from your perspective, like where did the seeds of that idea come from in RHAP? Because, maybe my parallel, even though obviously I was part of the wrestling wrap up from like the beginning of the podcast, like my parallel, I think is when I think about the Black voices of RHAP podcasts, because when I applied and did my interview for RHAP, I talked about Survivor, and I knew like I wanted to have a space to talk about social issues because that was a thing that I did, but I didn't actually really see that within RHAP before. And then a year later, after being accepted to the class of 2020 and becoming a podcaster, I got to do that. But I mean, it must be even more extreme for you. Like, when did you realize that wrestling could be a thing, and kind of what were the steps to bringing that to life? Because you're really, and what I always say to people, I honestly, I don't want to say hate's a strong word, but it does kind of bother me when it's like when my name might come before yours in relation to the wrestling wrap up, or where someone might be like, someone might even be like, oh, Matt, like your podcast. I'm like, no. Mari's the boss here. Mari's the boss. She's the EST of RHAP and the wrestling wrap up. But like, where did the seed of the idea kind of start for you? And maybe we go from there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I guess the seed is I have to shout out my husband, James Forth, and our best friend, like Havan. They are the ones who got me back into wrestling. Both of them, my husband works, he went to school in like for the film industry, and his best friend Havan, he's a writer and he's an actor right now. And when we all got back into wrestling, that's when we all would constantly talk, and we were constantly like, oh, we could book this better. Like every wrestling fan thinks they can book it better, and they're writers, and we wanted to start our own wrestling podcast, but the timing didn't work. Production didn't work. You know what I'm saying? Like we were all busy. We all had different schedules. We had a great idea. It's nothing like the wrestling wrap up at all. But that's what sparked in me, like thinking like maybe I could do a wrestling podcast. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I could do that. So when we became the class of 2020, and Rob was asking for, if you have any ideas, pitch to us, I was like, you know what, I want to pitch a wrestling podcast, because it's something that Rob did not have on his channel. It is very closely, we talk about how it's very closely related to reality TV. Even so far as we had reality TV stars both on wrestling and in reality,
Exactly.
vice versa. And then you DM me, and then that's how the magic happened. We both just happen to be wrestling fans who are in the class of 2020. And we're very lucky that worked out, because that could have went left, couldn't it?
Well, so
because we didn't even know each other.
Well, no, exactly. It could have been. And it's so funny because I think the way that I remember it, and I did not, Actually, I'm
You
never gonna
did.
go back to check. I'm never gonna go back
It
to
was you
check. Like,
first.
oh, I know it was me
Yeah.
because I think if I had to assume anything, it was either I saw like wrestling fan in your. I probably saw wrestling fan
I
in
think
your
I tweeted
bio.
something. I think I
Maybe you
tweeted
tweeted
something about
something,
wrestling.
and I was like, "Oh my god, we're in the class of 2020. That's so cool." And
Yeah.
this was also for me. I'll say this was at a point where I'd done a few of the BB23 podcasts, and I never did live feed updates with Taryn.
Right.
I still don't do those just because like that's
Too much
it
pressure.
yeah, and but also it's like the time of day too comes with
Yeah.
that, and it's just a lot of things. And I remember I messaged you and I was just like, shout out, hey, that's cool that you're a wrestling fan. Like I'm a
Mhm.
wrestling fan, but like not to the I mean, I was a huge wrestling fan growing up.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm like at the peak of my well, fandom is a very complicated word, but I'm
It
probably at the
is.
peak of my wrestling fandom now in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
right? And one thing I wanted to bring up too is like I genuinely feel, and this is kind of where I have to thank you. I genuinely think like there's a good chance I wouldn't have still been in RHAP if not for you and the wrestling
Oh.
wrap up, which like
Mhm.
comes to mind for me. But like it's literally like the butterfly effect of if there was no wrestling wrap up, like we're
Mhm.
not talking about Young Rock with Rob Cesternino a year ago. We're
Yeah.
definitely not doing any of the wrestling podcasts. We're probably not podcasting together. I can't
Mhm.
think of. We're not talking about the Bachelorette
Yeah.
together later this year. Like there's all these different. We're not talking about the challenge or whatever, Real
Yeah,
World
the real
Homecoming two
home.
days
Yeah.
ago or whatever.
Mhm.
And so like I don't know. It to me, I have to credit you so much for even just like still being in RHAP
Oh.
because like I don't know, like shout out to I won't name names, but like the RHAP production team, maybe they
Mhm.
would have called me up for Survivor, the top 40. There's a chance, but like
Yeah.
I've convinced myself like no, if not for the wrestling wrap up, I would not still be in RHAP. So I
It
have to like give you credit for that, and I hope you take that rather than convincing me that my
no,
vision of
I
reality is false because I
no,
really believe it.
I will take a little bit of credit. However, I
Yeah.
just want to point out that you are a great podcaster. Like everybody loves the voices, the black voices of
Yeah.
RHAP. You know,
I'm
they're
so
gonna love
biased.
Pod Friends. You know,
Well, no, I mean, it's already
they
been
love
cool
it.
to it's already they already love
Yeah.
it. This is cool. It's cool to
W
get the feedback too.
and
And
also,
it's
wait, can we
oh
point out
no.
how when we were in the My Weekly Meltdown and it was live, all of the comments were like, "Hey, Matt,
Ah!
love your podcast. Oh, Matt, love it. Can't wait to hear Matt." I was like, "Oh, wow."
Yeah, well, about time, about time. That's right, Mari. I'm like I don't know where I was, but I was on a podcast like a week or two ago. Actually, I think I was on
Was
like
it a challenge?
the challenge,
Uh-huh.
the reality podcast, not the
Yeah,
challenge wrap up.
yeah.
And I made some comment where I was like, I don't know what I was talking about. This is the thing about things like, uh just like the
Podcasting.
quotes even
Oh, yeah.
like out of context type of things, except this was not on
Mhm.
out of context where I said something. I'm like, Mari, I would if I had to, I would be the Shawn Michaels to your Marty Jannetty. And if people don't get that reference,
Yeah.
Shawn Michaels super kicked Marty Jannetty through a glass window. This is all storyline. He did it to get ahead. He ended up being
Yep,
one of the biggest wrestling stars, Hall of
of all
Famers in
time.
history.
Mhm.
Um, Look, I feel like I might be at a place where I have to do that, but I think you're more of the Shawn
Dang.
Michaels. I think you're more of the Shawn Michaels, and I'm more of the Marty Jannetty. So,
I
and I'm
I
happy
don't
with it. I'm content.
I don't
I
know. I think we just really lucked out
We
because
really did, honestly,
our
we did.
podcasting styles are perfectly mesh with each other
They do.
just from like a production standpoint as well. Like you do all what I consider the heavy lifting
I
in
mean, and
like
right back at you too.
yeah,
I'm like,
right.
what? We
Like
have a guest this week? What?
yeah, exactly. Like we just perfectly complement each
Literally.
other, and I love that. I love our rapport.
Yeah.
Meeting you in person, as many times as we
Yes.
had, has just been the best. I just want to like hug you when you're
Oh.
tall self,
Yeah,
so
I know.
freaking
Seriously,
tall.
you're tall too, though, but not as tall as me. But like,
Yeah,
still,
I'm like
but yeah,
what?
but I'm like, I know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Um, But
We
no, this
truly lucked out,
this
and
is
I'm so glad. I couldn't imagine doing, the wrestling RHAP with anybody else.
I agree, and I think the cool thing about it too has not only been, like, podcasting with you and, like but, like, the fact that we're still doing it because
Mhm,
it's just so cool to be able to, like, grow as podcasters and grow our voices and kind of become confident in them and how we speak because, again, when I think back to the class of 2020, what I know is that and I won't even name names, but like there are certain people who day one, A1 knew what their voices were.
mhm,
Easy had it was so easy for them to find how they showed up. With others, it's like you hear this person on the live feed update, you hear that person, you hear that person on the recap. Okay, how should I show up? What should my voice be? And
mhm.
I kind of felt like I knew, but like doing the wrestling wrap up has been a cool way to really like truly solidify how we talk about things, and it's made us so
Mhm.
much better, and we still do it, and people should still listen to it.
Yeah.
But I beyond that that beautiful moment that we just had,
Yes.
I want to ask, like, so Mari,
Mhm.
do you know how to drive stick?
I do. My mom taught me very young because my mom used to just drive nothing but stick. Like that's literally all she would drive. I can't remember the story of why she used to do that. I think it had something tied to the military, but she drove stick all of my life, I think, until she like had Mustangs and stuff like that until she finally relented and got like an SUV, like a family car. But she loves driving stick and she taught me how to do it when I was very young. So, I mean, I
So
haven't done it in a while, but I can still do it.
could you speak more than one language?
Okay, no, I'm like halfway through my Duolingo for French. Like I said in 2020, I was like, I am going to learn a language during the pandemic. One of those failed things like baking. Like I didn't bake, but you know how people tried. Those hobbies you picked up in lockdown. I'd say I'm pretty good at I've always been better at understanding languages. Like I took what for the required 4 years of Spanish. I can understand it, but I can never say it back. You know what I'm saying? So
Okay, we'll work on it.
we'll
Well,
work on
we're
that.
gonna
Yeah.
have you work on that for when we apply to I have the Amazing Race casting link pulled up here, but we'll come back to that. Phil Kogan, if you're listening, call us because we don't have your number to call you. But yeah, like beyond that, so what we're gonna be on the Amazing Race one day. Shout out to everyone. Check us
Mm.
out on season 40. I don't know what number
We'll
season
see.
it is.
Okay.
We're gonna beat Chappelle and Maggie
Yeah.
in their team and
If
all
they're there,
else.
we're beating them. Yes.
But Mari, like there's so much we could dive into, so much more
Mhm.
to talk about. I think one thing I want to do before kind of getting more to like the wrap up, we're talking about wrestling, and I'm so curious, actually, to be honest, like less about Naomi and your love for Naomi,
Mhm.
WWE Total Divas
Yeah.
superstar Naomi, but about Sasha Banks. I want to
Okay.
talk with you about Sasha Banks.
Okay.
So she's your fave.
Yeah, she is. It's kinda
Why?
hard because Bianca is really, like, grabbing a hold of my heart right now,
Yeah,
but we'll talk
like
about Sasha.
no, I know we have to leave Bianca. Like
I
Bianca's
know.
great. She'll be at Sasha's level at some point. But like,
Yeah.
what is it for you about Sasha Banks that you love or that you see yourself in more broadly? Like,
I think what I love about Sasha Banks is she is literally when I say she's the best women's wrestler, I'm not being hyperbolic. I think it's always been like, her and Io Shirai are always they're like, who's the number one in the world? You can make a case for either one. But Sasha is just I like her because she's great at her craft. She's great at her craft. She's great at selling. She's great at putting people over.
Mhm.
She's great at like giving you something in the ring. Like even if against opponents, she can wrestle a broom. She's a broomstick wrestler. We know what this means.
Yeah.
When you say a broomstick wrestler, it means she can wrestle anybody and get a good match out of them. And that is one of the hardest talents to ever master. And the main thing about this is she also has the attitude to back it up, like
Yeah.
in character and out of character. I don't know if you remember, it was like back in what, like 20, I want to say it was like 2017, 2018. Sasha was when she was getting that bad rap, like of maybe having like being a diva behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
then come to find out it was just like her, like stating, how she felt, and talking
Literally,
about.
she was, like, in
Yeah.
the airport once, and then people
Yes.
made comments about her not wanting to take pictures and,
With
like
fans,
yeah.
yeah. Like I love that she knows her boundaries and she states her boundaries, from everything I heard of. I like that she isn't afraid to take up space in a room, because for us as Black women, like that's one of the hardest things we can do is asserting ourselves in a room, no matter what the room is. And I love that about her. Like, not only are you sticking up for yourself, are you being very loud about what you deserve and what type of respect you demand, but she backs it up with actually being
Yeah.
good. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing, is backing it up, and knowing, she's even said it, like having to work twice as hard to, be given scraps, even though she's better than, some of the women who were given higher places on the card, like, but
Mm.
also always fighting. Like, there's always footage of her in somebody's ring training. Like,
Yeah.
that I think that's the biggest thing I like about her, because she knows that she always has to perfect her craft. We were talking about on my weekly meltdown that you can always learn. Like, you should never not be willing to learn something new. And that is one of the things I really love about Sasha, because she truly seems to always be trying something new. And
Yeah.
that's why she's my favorite women's wrestler.
But I think the thing that's cool about this, and one reason I'm so glad you're always God, I'm making myself sick because I'm just like about to compliment you, but you're always so great. Like I feel like I could set you up for anything. But
Yeah.
also, what's great about that I'm taking away is just that when people look at wrestling, they kind of often see something silly or ridiculous, and like they don't see the depth of, oh, I actually find representation in this person in XYZ ways. And
Exactly.
as a wrestling fan, like the wrestlers, and I've only been able to realize this and articulate this now, but like the way that I liked X-Men, Power Rangers, all that stuff when I was really young, I switched over to like loving wrestling and reality
Mhm.
TV. But like loving wrestling because I was able to see those same like superhuman characters, larger than life characters. But Mari, I'm gonna put you on the spot here really quickly as we kind of get toward the end of this.
Okay.
I want you to create a RHAP.
For who?
So I'm going to give you an option. You know what?
Mhm.
No, no, no. I want it for yourself. I was going to give you the option of like you could do it for your husband, but I'm curious, like if you were a wrestler. So on the Wrestling Rap, we do a
Mm.
segment called Create a RHAPsler
Mhm.
where Mari and I compete to come up with wrestling gimmicks. Mari always comes up with the best ones for our guests. Always her to win because hers are better than mine. But a Rapsler is basically like what's that wrestler's character, what's their
Mhm.
look, what's their finishing move, maybe what's their entrance. I already know you're probably coming out to Formation by Beyonce
Yeah,
because like that's it.
yeah.
But like beyond
Yeah,
that, what would
all
your
black.
Rapsler for you be? Like what would that wrestling character be?
I think, I'm gonna make myself a manager that takes bumps, because
Okay.
I love a good manager
Save your
role.
back. Save your
Yeah,
back. Yeah.
yeah. Like, first off, I like to talk, so I'm a manager, and I have to specify one that takes bumps and like takes them often.
Hmm.
I'm really willing to go MVP style. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
legit take the bumps. Um, if I had to create my own Rahapsler, I would also think I would be I don't care. I would definitely do like militant, all black, take it back to a Nation of Domination style,
Oh, man.
honestly. Yeah, you maybe like get a play off of like Panther,
Mhm.
like, like Dark Links or something crazy like
Oh,
that, And I would love to be a manager for like the next Biggie, or Lashley. Just being so pro black that people just like it's just in their face. You
I
know
don't
what I'm
like
saying? Like
Mari. I don't like Mari, but I don't like her, but I know there's something. I don't like it that you want that response where they don't like you,
like
but they don't
so
know
you
why.
always yeah, you always like think like, do I want to be a heel or do I want to be a face? Like everybody wants to be liked. I want to be liked too,
Yeah.
but it's just so much fun and you just have so much more wiggle room being a heel.
Mhm.
But I also don't like that a lot of black wrestlers, people are like, just turn them heel.
Yeah.
Like people just you don't have to be just because you're black doesn't mean you have to be successful as a heel. So
Yeah.
I would always, of course, love to be able to switch back and forth because those are my favorite characters. So I would love to be like a face as well. Um, but I would just have to do that because my life has been so pro black. I was raised in a household that my mom made sure I was taught the value of who I am
Yeah.
very quickly and very early, and to have pride in that, and not feel bad about having pride in who I am, and trying to know my roots. That's why my name, I go by Mari, but my full name is Mariama, which is Swahili. And, I don't have direct links to Africa because, the whole ancestors slavery
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
my parents always try to make sure that we had like roots and stuff like that, which was probably another reason why I also went to an HBCU,
Mm.
and all of that. So that's a huge part of my life, and if we're gonna turn it up to 11, that's what I would want to do. I would want to do that type of gimmick.
So I love that answer, and it actually feeds into my last question really
Mhm.
well. Um, if your life were a book or documentary, Mari,
It'd be
what
boring.
would the title be, and why? Why? I'm gonna keep
um
stalling. Oh wait, you're ready. Look at
yeah, I'm
this,
ready. I don't
Mari
know.
always ready.
No, no, Mari doesn't know. um I am not good at coming up with titles. I think you established that last week. The title of my book.
I believe in you. You've got it. It's all there.
Oh god,
Look
I
at
don't
it.
know.
Look at it.
Um,
And you know what? As you think about that quietly, because I know as podcasters, we know that we can't have dead air. We have to
okay.
keep talking.
No,
So
I
I'm
was
going to keep
okay.
talking right now.
No, I'm gonna I like I just like that thought of just taking up space,
Damn.
taking up space.
I like that.
Just I want to make sure if I'm in a room, if I'm on a podcast, I want you to know that I'm here and I want you to know my viewpoint, and it's my experience, and I want to get that across. And I also want people to understand that when you are getting your experience across, and when you are, coming from a place of what you've seen and done, and what you've, you know, been accustomed to, it's not to denigrate or to put down somebody else's experience. We talk about that on the Wrestling RHAP a
Yeah.
lot, and we talked about it on my weekly meltdown. But the first thing to understanding and learning each other is trying to understand each other's experiences first and foremost, and not get defensive, not automatically assume that my position is means I'm in opposition to you, if I'm not directly in opposition, because if I'm in opposition to you, you'll know. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
But that's like one thing I feel like I definitely like want to get across. um I don't know where you're going next, Matt, but there are 2 points that I just really want to put out there while I have this platform that you've given me.
Mari, this is the thing. If anyone, just to get a little sneak peek behind the curtain, that if we were to go over to the wrestling rehab up to like our Google Doc, our show notes, it is
Mhm.
probably something like 150 pages
Yeah,
at this
pages.
point.
Mhm.
And it's only been a year of podcasting, and this speaks a lot to Mari. So Mari, the floor is yours. This is your podcast. I wish I could like flip in the again YouTube version. I wish I could flip us around like
Oh my
so that
god,
we're
it's
in
not
opposite
that
spots.
serious.
I know it's not, but yeah, like what's on your mind?
I just wanna talk about, like, the healthcare system,
Yeah.
really quick, and just, like,
Mari, I
how
just want to say first of
yeah.
all, you always I hope people could understand before they listen to you how
Uh-huh.
many like knowledge bombs, how much wisdom, how much thought that you drop on the Wrestling Rahap Up alone, but
Yes.
also on all the other podcasts you're on.
Yeah, I
And
try.
so I'm sure people will listen, but I think they'll listen even more now that I interrupted you.
Mhm.
And now I'm gonna stop.
I just
Mm,
wanna say, like, our
yes.
healthcare system is like, right now, it is buckling under the weight of a pandemic, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So, like, be kind to your healthcare workers, but also, you know, become a healthcare worker, like I said, when I was growing up and science was my favorite subject, they only told me about being a doctor or a nurse. There are so many healthcare positions out there that you can do that does not require 12 years of schooling. And I
Yeah.
urge people, especially people who are, just starting out, or a lot of people didn't know this. That's why I really want to try and reach out to young people. STEM is doing a great job with reaching out to young people about science and technology and all of that. But like, look into your hospital careers. Like I said, I'm a medical technologist. Half the time when I say that phrase, people have no idea what I'm talking about. We have a really bad shortage of medical technologists, just like we have a bad shortage of nurses. But like, it is something that you can get, you get your 4-year degree and then you can start immediately, and I really want people to look into, like, radiology technicians, healthcare management, medical billing too is very easy, easy to get into. So really, if you can, support your healthcare workers, try and, get your kids interested in science and STEM to help out. Also, there is a worldwide shortage on blood right now. So if you can
Mm,
donate blood, especially Black people, unfortunately, underprivileged communities, Black and Brown communities are, they're not able to donate as frequently, but that is very important. I'm not gonna go. I was my last 4 years of medical technology. I worked in a blood bank, so
yeah.
all I did was match people's blood day in and day out, and there is a real benefit of having people of all races donate in order to find like perfect matches for people.
Well,
So please, please, please get out and donate now. I know the American Red Cross has some very outdated guidelines on some stuff. I do not
yeah.
agree with it.
Yeah.
However, comma but as Chappelle would say,
Uh,
like we really need help right now.
yeah.
Um um with the way the healthcare system is going. And also, um systemic racism in the healthcare system is a huge problem, and one of the ways to combat that is to get into the healthcare system and change it from within, change um these outdated thought processes for treating patients, especially patients of different races.
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to go nowhere near our maternal death rate, and how we have the highest maternal death rate in the developed countries, and how it affects Black women 4 times more than white women. Education withstanding, it doesn't matter if you are a high school educated or college educated Black women, or women of color, you are greatly affected. As somebody who had a child and it was
Yeah.
very difficult, um it is ridiculous. So the one way to change the system is also to get into it and be that change. Woo. And then finally, um I
Uh,
encourage people to go to HBCUs, because one of the things that I know a lot of my friends who considered HBCUs but ended up going to PWIs, which is predominantly white institutions. They
mhm.
would say stuff like, I grew up thinking I wasn't Black enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't fit in with the Black people at my high school. The great thing about HBCUs is there's a myriad of Black people that are so different. You know, you have your gamers, you have your athletes, you have your Black Republicans, you know, you have that's the great thing about HBCUs. You get exposed to people from so many places. I met so many people in school. Meeting like legit New Yorkers. Like, there's so many New Yorkers at Howard. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what it was so funny. The new Black people from
Brooklyn.
New York were so different, and
That's a whole other
they know what I'm
podcast
talking
and
about.
conversation. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, but I just encourage HBCUs as well, just because it is one of those experiences that you'll never get, because not the world doesn't look like what HBCUs look like. So I encourage people to go do that too. So, and if anybody's offended by that, I can't help you. I talk
Me
about my
neither.
experiences. I advocate for me and my people and everybody. And I do believe in intersectionality. Of course, go check us out on My Weekly Meltdown, where we talk about
Yeah.
intersectionality. But that's just something I want to talk about while we're here on Pod Friends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mari, like before as we wrap out, because
Yeah.
you need to have the final word. Could you um like okay, so on the wrestling wrap up, you always close us out, and I physically am unable to end this recording without you closing us out. So could
Oh
you just
God.
like do it?
Okay. Bye, Pod Friends.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what your sign out is. I just gave
What
you one. Is that not it?
sure. Okay, well, bye everybody. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Pod Friends. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mari. I really loved having this conversation. And as I said, I admire Mari. I'm so thankful for her. She is my RHAP podcasting sister. And Mari, I just want to thank you for doing that interview. And I also want to give a special thanks to Will from America for the theme song, Pod Friends, and also thanks to the RHAP team, including Scott St. Pierre and everyone who's helping get Pod Friends out into the world. And last but not least, if you want to kind of connect with Pod Friends, as I said at the top of the show, follow at Hey Pod Friends, and also submit a nomination for guests you want to see on the podcast. That's at bit.ly/podfriendsnom. And let me know what you think. I hope that you could stay tuned, because there are about 6 more episodes coming in this first season of Pod Friends before Survivor 42 kicks off. And I am really excited for you to join me on the journey of learning about not only the amazing people in this RHAP community, but also learning more about ourselves through their stories. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks, as always, for being a Pod Friend.